right behind this rock, there are 3 penguins.
No way, there are 3. It is really surreal to be standing in the tropics and looking at penguins. This is exactly the kind of adventure we were hoping for. Off the western coast of South America, there is a special little cluster of islands known as the Galápagos. Untouched by human development for centuries, this remote archipelago is home to some of the most unbelievable animals on Earth. Living legends roam freely in a world all their own, and these fascinating creatures have inspired a love of nature in people all over the globe. We would know, because the wildlife of the Galápagos set us on our journey too. My name is Harrison, and this is Evan. We're twin brothers on a mission to help you become an insider in the natural world by sharing the unique and remarkable stories that all animals have to tell. And if you want to see some of the craziest stories of survival that nature ever devised, there's nowhere better to go than the Galápagos. Trust me, there's a reason we've been obsessed with this place since we were little kids. Exploring these islands has been a lifelong dream for us, and joined by some knowledgeable and talented friends.
You got what you're looking for?
This trip was our chance to go all out and check off some real bucket list species. It felt like it barely took any effort at all to get right up close with some of the most iconic animals on Earth. Look at the size of this tortoise. I am absolutely blown away. And if you know where to go, you can experience some genuine legends in a way that you would never believe is possible. Look at this guy. Look at that.
That is exactly what we were hoping to see.
But after a week of one of the most fulfilling and productive missions we've ever had, there was still one major target that had eluded all of us: the little-known Galápagos penguin. Yes, you heard that right. As if the giant tortoises and swimming lizards weren't enough, the Galápagos have their very own penguin species, which in addition to being totally adorable, also happens to be one of the rarest birds in the entire world. They arrived in the archipelago around 4 million years ago, and the fascinating story of how these cold weather birds have adapted to an arid tropical climate has made them the weirdest penguins on Earth, and the bird target that we agreed we cannot leave without finding. That's easier said than done though, because unlike so much of the other wildlife in the islands, getting to film a penguin up close is incredibly challenging and requires a huge amount of luck. Realistically, all we could hope for was a fleeting glimpse, but all that changed when our friend Emilio, who has spent time living in the Galápagos, told us about a little-known beach on the island of Isabela that the locals talk about, where penguins and some other rare birds are often seen in good numbers if you can get there. There's just one problem with that. The beach is several hours away from the nearest town, and accessible only by a brutal boat ride through the rough waters that surround the island. And we can't just rush out there unprepared, because there's only a narrow window of time in which it's even possible to get to the beach. There's no human infrastructure there at all, so you have to time your arrival with the low tide to be able to reach the shore. And if you don't get back before the tide comes in, you'll be stranded. This was our only chance to see the penguins though, so risks aside, we had to make it work. We met up with some local expert guides and made the grueling trip up the coast. And as the boat literally kicked our butts, I couldn't help but think of the story of the penguins, because the powerful currents we were navigating are actually what brought penguins to the islands in the first place. They're also the same currents that now supply the birds with the ice-cold water and abundant nutrients that they rely on to survive. And if they didn't exist, there is no way the penguins could live here. The current didn't do us any favors though, and by the time we made it to the spot, we were all a bit battered, but nothing could contain our excitement. Once we got into the cove, it didn't take us long at all to spot the unmistakable shapes of the birds we had traveled so far to find hanging out on some exposed rocks. All that was left to do now is make it to shore and get a good shot of them. So you know, the hard part. We're hiking to the beach now. It's been quite a difficult journey to get here. This is such a crazy location to think about seeing penguins, but they're here. We are all extremely excited right now. So here's how this mission went down. We're hiking through the dense trees surrounding this cove, and before we can even get in view of the penguins, something stops us in our tracks. The beach isn't empty. A whole flock of flightless cormorants, a Galapagos endemic and another of the world's rarest birds, is kinda sitting in our way. Alright, there they are. We're still hanging out in this little patch of trees because we're not sure how the cormorants will react to our presence. So we want to get plenty of shots in case they flush when we step onto the beach. On one hand, this is great because these cormorants are next to impossible to see up close and they're a huge target for all of us. But on the other hand, we now have to delay our penguin hunt because we don't want to scare the cormorants off. And then we notice one slight complication. Remember those trees all around us? Turns out, we're sitting in a grove of one of the most dangerous plants on Earth. One of the unexpected challenges in filming on this beach is we are actually surrounded by manchineel trees, which are one of the most poisonous trees in the entire world.
Yeah, here in Galapagos, we call them manzanillo, and they have these little yellow fruits that look kind of unassuming, but if you eat them, it's basically like eating a packet of acid. It'll chew a hole through your stomach.
Now, one of the things about this tree is that it's said to be particularly dangerous to be under them while it's raining, because the toxins can leach out of the tree and onto anything below them, and it's currently raining.
We gotta get out of here.
Yeah. So we're sitting there under these deadly poisonous trees, trying to figure out if the cormorants are comfortable enough for us to get on the beach, all while the tide is slowly but surely creeping back in. At this point, it's either push forward or risk leaving with nothing but terrible blisters. So yeah, push forward it is. This is it. These are Galapagos flightless cormorants, the largest cormorant species in the entire world, and by far one of the most bizarre birds you could hope to find here in the Galapagos. What's crazy about these cormorants is that they've actually lost the ability to fly, hence the name flightless. You can see they have those tiny little wings that are way too small to propel those giant bodies into the air, but what they are good for is swimming. Very similar to the wings of penguins, they help them swim very agilely through the water, and that's exactly what they've evolved to do. And what's fascinating is, these birds would not have evolved flightlessness until they arrived here on the Galapagos. But these islands are only about 4.5 million years old, which means that they would have had to evolve flightlessness, lose the ability of their wings within that time span, which, evolutionarily speaking, is a very fast amount of time for a bird to lose the ability to fly. In fact, it's thought to be one of the fastest periods that a bird has ever lost its ability to fly. The cormorants have one of the most seemingly unlikely stories of any animal. It's really hard to imagine why the best answer to their problems would be losing the power of flight. After all, their ancestors could fly when they first arrived in the islands. So the question is, what possible benefit could there be from losing that ability? Well, as it turns out, the cormorant's story perfectly demonstrates where the real pressure that shapes the survival of the birds here comes from. The Galapagos are very unique because they have large expanses of untouched natural habitat with no large land predators to speak of. With no need to fly away from predators or travel very far to get food resources, the taxing and energy-intensive ability to fly doesn't actually serve the cormorants as well as being able to swim, because they're getting what they need to survive underwater. See, the Galapagos lack major land predators, but that's because they pretty much lack any food on land, especially if you're a meat-eating bird. The only place that prey is abundant is underwater, as the rich ocean ecosystems that surround the islands are full of tasty marine life, and that's exactly what the cormorants have honed in on. It's interesting. In many ways, they've become successful in this environment precisely to the extent that they've evolved to function like penguins, which is to say, by becoming masterful aquatic hunters. Their wings are too small and sparse to fly, but they need to be this size in order to swim effectively. Something we want to correct from the last video where we featured these guys is that they don't actually flap their wings underwater like penguins do. Instead, cormorants tuck their wings against their body to reduce drag, turning themselves into feathery torpedoes propelled by their powerful back legs. This seems to do the trick, because they're capable of reaching depths of up to 73 meters, which they could never do if they had bulky wings getting in the way. These birds hunt along the seafloor, and their long necks allow them to reach deep into rock crevices or holes, which is where their preferred prey of bottom-dwelling fish and mollusks like octopuses like to hang out. Their ocean-going lifestyle is the key to the cormorant's success, and it's no coincidence that the same is true for the penguins. Hunting underwater is what they're purpose-built for, and they spend most of their time either foraging or resting between bouts of feeding. The penguins are adept piscivores, or fish eaters, and they will dive over 30 meters down in search of small fish like sardines and anchovies, as well as some invertebrates like crustaceans and squid. This is in line with the survival strategies that all penguins use, so even though they're doing it in a really unlikely place, they've had the right answers for this test since long before they ever arrived in the Galapagos. And it's a good thing that they do, because unlike the land environments, there are plenty of aquatic predators like sharks and sea lions who would be happy to take down a little snack-sized penguin. Not to mention that the water itself is as rough and turbulent as it is frigidly cold most of the time, so it's no easy feat to make a living from the ocean around here. Seeing the cormorants is a massive success in its own right, as they're arguably harder to get close to even than the penguins are, and this is the only spot we've ever heard of where it's even possible to do in this way. We could have spent all day with them, but if we let ourselves get too distracted, we'll miss our chance to see the penguins we came here for. The clock is ticking, so we have to move on.
Yeah, that's gonna be easier said than done. The funny thing is, the penguins aren't actually that far away from the beach, but standing between us and them is about 1,000 feet of treacherous, slippery lava boulders.
This is maybe the most rugged place we've ever explored. Climbing up these cliffs right in front of the ocean. It's pretty treacherous for the cameras, but I gotta say, it's totally worth it. Oh man, gotta watch my step here.
Time isn't on our side since we spent a while filming the cormorants, but we can't afford to rush this and make a mistake. If we move too quickly, we risk slipping off the rocks and getting seriously injured, destroying our camera gear and effectively ending the trip in the process. Or perhaps even worse, we could scare the penguins away before we can ever get a good shot of one. Gotta have priorities, right? With each slow, careful step, our anticipation keeps building. And at this point, we can hear and also smell that the penguins are close. Finally, we crest the last rock between us and our target, and all of our efforts come together into one unforgettable moment.
We've met up with Emilio and Gage, and the penguins are right on the other side of this rock. So I'm gonna get my first up-close view of them.
Right behind this rock, there are 3 penguins. There are 3? 2 juveniles, 1 adult.
Oh, wow.
And we have them just like at, 4 meters away from us.
No kidding. This is absolutely insane. What do you think?
Dude, I have seen penguins for many years now, but always far away or in the water. This is as close as I've ever been to one.
Alright. Penguins are down there. There they are. We made it. Now we can get some great shots. We finally made it to the area where the penguins are hanging out, and this is absolutely blowing my mind. There are 5 of them sitting on the rock behind us, and a couple more swimming in this cove. These are Galapagos penguins, the only tropical penguins in the world, and the only penguins found north of the equator. It's really strange to even see them. It absolutely is. We've found some of the most incredible birds in the Galapagos, but nothing tops seeing penguins in the wild for the very first time. On that subject, it's really encouraging that we're not just seeing adults, though there are some stunners behind us. We've also seen a few juveniles here on this beach, which is a good sign that the population is still growing. And with the challenges these guys are facing, that's a really good sign. We had to keep our reactions pretty quiet so we didn't scare the penguins away, but trust me when I tell you, we were all freaking out every minute we were sitting in front of them. I actually remember vividly being in that moment, and I just kind of had to stop and watch them for a minute before I even started getting any shots. Finally seeing the penguins with my own eyes, not in a book or through a screen or anything, is literally a core memory. And I'm not kidding, I still think about it pretty often to this day. I do as well. Nothing can really prepare you for what it feels like when you're in front of the target you've come so far to find. You get the shots, and they're actually good. They came out. There's a wave of relief and excitement, but also urgency, because we're still sitting on these really precarious rocks, trying to get everything done before we get stranded with the penguins for the night. The craziest part, though, is as much as we were losing our minds, the penguins didn't really seem to be bothered by us in the slightest. They just went about their normal activities and totally ignored
the crazy humans peeking out from behind the rocks. And since they weren't going anywhere, we knew we were going to be able to get the shots we needed. So once our worries about flushing them went away, we could truly appreciate how special this encounter was.
When you see the penguins up close like this, it's obvious how well they've shaped their lives to be the ultimate marine predators. Their whole body plan is perfect for their aquatic lifestyle, down to the tiniest details like the structure of their wings. They actually function more like flippers than normal wings, and their round, smooth shape allows them to glide easily through the water with very little resistance. Their legs are also super short and stubby to reduce drag, and they can actually steer themselves by angling their feet as they swim.
Even their feathers are specialized for this purpose. They're incredibly dense to provide insulation from the freezing cold water in the Galapagos, but when they're submerged, the feathers get pressed against their bodies to make the penguins as hydrodynamic as possible. They're adorably awkward on land, but lightning fast when they hit the water. And thanks to their unique adaptations, they can swim up to 35 kilometers per hour when they're hunting or avoiding predators. When you swim that fast and have to catch fish that are even faster, you need a really good method to make sure you don't lose your grip on your prey, which is exactly why they have such broad, sharp beaks. And all that crazy looking stuff on the inside helps them latch onto their prey and not let it slip away.
There's pretty much nothing these guys haven't thought of when it comes to perfecting their swimming and hunting techniques, and getting to see their features up close was mesmerizing. But this cove had one more surprise in store for us, and it managed to steal our attention away even from our main targets.
As we were filming the penguins, another endemic Galapagos bird showed up. A Galapagos hawk. He's sitting in the cliff right above us. We haven't seen one of these on our entire trip so far, and there are actually two of them moving around the cliffs here, and I've finally been able to get the camera on it. I am amazed at how close these birds are coming to us. Oh, there are three hawks. Oh man, this is crazy.
Seeing a Galapagos hawk at all is something that we actually had no idea was going to be possible on this trip. They can be found on many of the islands, but sightings are few and far between and almost always from a crazy distance, so that made the looks that these hawks afforded us even more special. They ended up hanging out in the cove for the rest of the time that we were there, and what was amazing is that they really seemed interested in who we were and what we were doing. They kept landing on different vantage points and staring down at us with their incredibly acute vision, scoping out our movements almost like they were trying to figure us out.
Now, the Galapagos hawk is the largest native land predator in the islands, so you may think that they were sizing up some of the penguins before they carried one off for lunch. But actually, adult penguins rarely ever end up on the hawk's menu. They're mainly eating small mammals like rodents, lizards like juvenile iguanas, and small birds like doves and seabird chicks. Even with the hawks around, the penguins still don't have to worry about predators on land. The real challenge for their survival actually comes from the intense tropical heat.
See, penguins are cold weather birds by nature, so the Galapagos penguins have had to specially adapt their bodies and behaviors to keep themselves cool. And we got to see several of those mechanisms in action as we were watching them. The most obvious of these is their tiny size, because this is actually the second smallest species of penguin in the entire world, only reaching 50 centimeters in length and 4 kilograms in weight at a maximum.
This lack of mass means that they can dissipate heat and cool their bodies much more efficiently, which they also do with behaviors like panting and yawning, which was absolutely adorable to watch and made for some of our favorite shots on the whole trip. Even the way they sit is specially adapted for this function, as they hunch their bodies over their feet to protect the exposed blood vessels there from the relentless Ecuadorian sun.
Right, and luckily they didn't have to do it while we were there, but when things get too hot to handle, all they have to do is jump into the freezing cold water to cool themselves off.
All of these unique strategies underscore what's so weird but also fascinating about Galapagos penguins. They're somehow both totally out of place and perfectly suited for the environment at the same time. But if you think about it, these must be the right answers to the challenges this place provides, because if they weren't, they never would have survived here so long in the first place.
However, there are new threats facing these birds that even their specialized evolution can't help them overcome, because the challenges are developing too quickly and too strongly for them to adapt in time. Global climate change, worsening climatic phenomena like the El Niño cycle, and shocking amounts of overfishing and exploitation of their habitat have pushed Galapagos penguins to the brink of extinction, which is why we're so excited and proud to have actually been able to find them in the wild and share their incredible story with you. Our time is up with the penguins. We really have to get back on the boat or else the tide is gonna get so high that we won't be able to safely get off the shoreline. But we did it. We got the shots we wanted. We've gotten to see penguins and cormorants in the wild. This has been an absolutely incredible adventure.
Reaching the boat after completing our goal was an amazing feeling, and we pretty much spent the whole ride back gushing about how insane this mission was. It's very rare to have the opportunity to share space with these birds, and it wasn't lost on us how lucky we were to have pulled this off when we did. This is a critical time in history for Galapagos penguins. If we're going to address the existential threats they're facing, we have to understand our role in them, which starts by recognizing that our day-to-day actions have real, serious effects on places you would never think of. But that means that we have the power to make positive changes too. And if we work together to reduce our impact on the planet, it is possible to protect the penguins' irreplaceable story into the future. The question now is, what can we really do to make these kinds of changes? Well, one answer lies in an unassuming habitat that may be much closer to home: the salt marshes of New Jersey. If you want to learn about the vital role this ecosystem plays in our lives, check out this video, where we show you how protecting the salt marsh could save both ourselves and some of New Jersey's most spectacular birds. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.